Whoa! Bonjour, everybody. Welcome. I'm your host, Monsieur Valois, and today we're going to be breaking down the AP French Language and Culture Course Exam and Description for the Fall 2020 assessment. Alright, so just before we get into it, it's important for me to let you know I do not work for the College Board or Advanced Placement. Nothing can replace really understanding the course and exam description available in the description below, nor the hours of classroom time that you'll be investing into your learning. I just wanted to provide teachers and students alike with an idea of what's expected over the course of this year and some tips from my experience in teaching the course. The explanation is mostly meant for teachers to really help you understand how to deliver the effective instruction and prepare your students for the exams, but it's also super useful for students as I'm going to be taking a very comprehensive and holistic approach to explaining how this course works. That being said, allons-y! There's a lot of mumbo jumbo around the AP French Language and Culture course. It's a one-year course, and basically you're going to be working on your reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills by being exposed to a variety of different kinds of texts that are all going to be related to course themes and learning objectives. There's a lot to learn, and so before we begin, I really want you to become familiar with two different resources that are going to help you so much if you're a teacher or you're a student throughout this year. The first one is the course and exam description. I'm going to be using the acronym CED as we go through the rest of this video. And of course, this is where you're going to find everything about the course framework. You're going to find what kinds of exams you have, the learning objectives. It has everything in there, but I am breaking it down for you in this video. Next resource is the AP Classroom. Do check this out. They have an amazing amount of resources available to you in this AP Classroom online platform. They got loads of media content, daily questions, and previous exam questions that you can find in the AP question bank. Teachers, this is going to save you loads of planning time. And students, this place has got so many resources. It's like a cave of wonders, but with French language acquisition skills instead of shiny treasure. Now, let's take a step back and look at the entire course framework of the AP French Language and Culture course. Number 1, skills. Number 2, themes. These are like course units, and each theme is going to have overarching essential questions that are going to help guide you through the content and promote you using language in a variety of different kinds of contexts. Thirdly, modes of communication. These are the ways and forms in which you are going to be exposed to texts and you are going to be creating texts. And there are 3 categories: interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational. Maintenant, let's take a closer look at the 8 skills I was talking to you about before. The course is broken down into 8 different skills, which should be nurtured throughout the course. Number 1, comprehend text. Comprehend written, audio-visual, and visual texts. That's pretty straightforward. Number 2, the skill of make connections. This is where you'll be asked to make interdisciplinary and cultural connections. Numéro 3, interpret text. Interpret the content on written or audio texts. Numéro 4, number 4, make meanings. You will be needed throughout the year to develop the skill of making meanings from different words and expressions. 5, speak to others. Practice communicating interpersonally by speaking with others. 6, write to others. This skill requires the ability to communicate interpersonally by writing to and with others. Numéro 7, present orally. Communicate through spoken presentations. And lastly, the 8th skill, present in writing. Communicate through written presentations. So those are our 8 skills, and each one of those can then be broken down further into sub-skills and learning objectives. Let's take an example. Skill category number 1. What we're asked to do here is comprehend written audio, audiovisual, and visual text, which could include text, pictures, numbers. How do we do that? We can break that down into further evaluating skills. So if that's skill number 1, we can say 1A is to describe the literal meaning of the text. Students should work on that skill. Another one could be 1B, describe the data. What do you see in this text? You need to be able to interpret it. Each evaluating skill can then be broken down further into learning objectives. So if we looked at the evaluating skill 1A, describe the literal meaning of the text, the learning objective 1A.1 would be identify the main idea of the text. 1A.2 would be identify supporting relevant details. So those are the objectives that are going to lead us to completing the skills that we want to achieve. So make sure to check out page 19 in the CED to really understand what are our evaluating skills and the learning objectives for this year. All right, now let's talk about these course themes. There are 6 of them, and each of these course themes should be based on essential questions that revolve around using the resources, the texts, and all the content from the unit to try and answer them. These themes are very broad and multidisciplinary, and they're going to cover a variety of different topics. So let's take a look. The first one, families and communities. That's theme number 1. We can look at topics such as age and class, citizenship, family structures, friendship and love. The next course theme, personal and public identities. We are going to be looking at different topics such as alienation and assimilation, beliefs and values, gender and sexuality, multiculturalism. The third theme is beauty and aesthetics. This is where we're going to be looking at topics that include architecture, literature, music, performing arts, visual arts. The fourth course theme is science and technology. Students will be exploring current research topics, ethical questions, intellectual property, social impact of technology, just to name a few of the topics. Our fifth course theme is going to be based on contemporary life. Topics could include education, holidays and celebrations, professions, travel, leisure and sports. The sixth and final course theme is based on global challenges that we face today. And these could be based on diversity, on the economy, on environment, on health, on human rights, on peace and war. So those are again some topics just to name a few. Important pour les professeurs, very important for teachers. These themes should be taught in chronological order as each unit deals with topics and material learned from the previous ones. Gradually, it's going to get a little harder and harder as the year goes on, and that's the intention. So it's really important that you follow the chronological order, scaffolding the knowledge as we move through the year. All right, let's talk about number 3, modes of communication. As we explore course themes, you're going to be engaged in 3 different modes of communication: interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational. These are going to be practiced through different kinds of texts throughout the year. So for instance, an interpretive text would involve the student and a written audio or visual stimuli, which could be, for instance, a reading, a short text on something, a letter, it could be a promotional advertisement, it could be an article on something. That's interpretive text because the student is required to interpret the text. The next one, interpersonal, would be between the student and other listeners or speakers. This is where we would consider a conversation to be interpersonal communication. And lastly, presentational communication. That will be done from the perspective of a student to an audience. So for instance, a speech or writing an argumentative essay could be considered presentational communication. All right, so these modes of communication and these kinds of texts are going to be very present in our 4th and final components of the course, the task modes. Okay, so as we can see from page 15 of the CED, these are basically the tasks that the students are to practice throughout the year and be expected to complete in their assessment in May. this is basically the May assessment. Taking a look at this table, we can get a better understanding of what these task modes really are. So there are 9 different types of stimuli that address interpretive print and audio sources, all of which should be challenging the student with multiple choice questions. So if we see the interview, if we have the letter, we have the literary text, those are all going to be multiple choice and interpretive, right? So you're going to listen to an audio source or you're going to be reading a print source. Regardless, those questions in May are going to be multiple choice questions. And then there are the 4 free response tasks. Those are the 4 last final tasks that you can see on this table. And those address interpersonal and presentational modes. So the email reply, for instance, you will be given a prompt, which is an email written to you with some questions and comments and queries that you need to complete. You respond back to that email as if you were writing back in real life to somebody, and that's why it's considered interpersonal. And the argumentative essay is presentational because that could be considered something that would be published, put on the web, or read in front of the class as you communicating, you the student communicating your opinion based off of texts and sources that will be given to you in this task. Teachers, a lot of the middle part of the CED is comprised of guides for each course theme that are going to include a number of different examples of tasks that you can use with your students. And each of these tasks is accompanied with a rubric that will help you evaluate the student's skills, evaluating skills, and learning objectives. So this is a huge treasure trove of information for you to be able to organize the course and assure that your students are well prepared for the final assessment. Teachers, again, between pages 130 and 143, there are some amazing and highly useful instructional strategies to create a number of activities based off of each of the 8 skill categories, so do check these out. Now, let's get to tonight's main event. Beginning on page 155, we have our course exam description. The exam is 3 hours long and contains 65 multiple choice questions and 4 free response questions. Here are the details of the exam, including the exam weighting and the timing. So if we look at section 1, part A, multiple choice questions, you got 30 questions. Those are all, like we had said before, interpretive communication, print texts. It's going to be worth 23% of the whole exam and is worth or lasts for 40 minutes. Part B, similar multiple choice questions, but also involves print and audio texts combined and audio texts. 35 questions here, worth slightly more, 27% of your grade, and will last 55 minutes. Next, section number 2, free response questions. These are the big mamas. The first question is the email reply. That will be worth 12.5% of your grade. The second one, the argumentative essay, worth the same weight. Third, conversation. And fourth, cultural comparison. Altogether, this is going to last 88 minutes, and that free response question, section 2 of the exam, is going to be worth 50% of your grade. Now, for you students, you can be assessed on any of those original 8 skill categories in any part of the exam, whether it be the multiple choice questions or the free response questions. All right, now let's take an even deeper plunge into the exam. Let's really get to understand what we're going to be evaluated on. The first section, multiple choice, like we said, is going to have 65 questions. It's worth half the grade. And this section is comprised of 9 different sets. Okay, each of those sets are going to have 1 or 2 visual or audio stimulus that will help you interpret that information and then be able to complete either 5 to 11 questions in each set. In fact, if you check out page 157 of the CED, you'll see how each set is broken down by the type of stimulus, how many questions it has, and which skills are going to be assessed. It's a pretty impressive document. You should check it out. Now let's get into the second part of your final assessment, which are the free response questions. So students are going to have 4 free response questions to answer to in this final assessment, and they will all be grounded in course themes. They're all going to have specific scoring guidelines, and they're tasks that you should be practicing throughout the course of the year. By the time you get to the final, it should not be, oh my goodness, I didn't know we have an email reply to do. So student or teacher alike, beginning on page 169, we're going to have some detailed information about each of these 4 task types. Let's take a look at them right now. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Monsieur Valois from the future. I apologize, but there's a problem. I accidentally deleted this clip on the first free response question, which is the email reply. All right, so the student is going to have 15 minutes to read an email that was sent to them and reply to it using the appropriate tone. It's generally formal and include a greeting, a closing, and make sure to reply to any kind of relevant details or questions involved in the text. All right, that's basically it. Let's talk about how to score that perfect 5 in responding to the first free response question. Number 1, email reply. So first, make sure that your response is appropriate within the context of the email task. If they're talking about a job opportunity, then you should keep it relevant to that. Also that you've provided all the relevant and required information, so that'd be answers to questions, providing relevant details, and to get a 5, you really got to elaborate on these a little bit. Not making a huge long text, but making sure you answer it and slightly more. Also, your communication is fully understandable. We can clearly read it. Occasional errors do not impede in understanding what you're trying to say. We had a varied and appropriate vocabulary in there. Your grammar, your syntax, it's all basically solid and sound. Few errors are permissible, but again, they shouldn't prevent the reader from understanding what you're trying to say. You've also used the appropriate register, so you're using the right conventions. You got good control of your cultural expressions in here too. You know what the appropriate greeting and closing are. And lastly, that you're able to really put together some complex sentences, okay? So they're not just basic statements. You can show evidence of the appropriate tense when you use conjugate verbs. So basically, that's what we're looking for, more complex communication skills. First and foremost, I should say that these tips are more long-term in nature and should be consistently nurtured throughout the year. So if you're quelqu'un de dernière minute, you might be in a bit of trouble, but it's not impossible. You can still pass. So the tip is, in order to succeed in this email reply, you should create a document entitled Cultural Expressions and Conventions, and throughout the course of the year, you're going to be adding to that document. So if you see a film or you hear something in class, you know, different ways of saying greetings, different ways of closing off conversations, throw them into a document, have a bank so that you can draw on these easily and you have a repertoire for when you're writing and speaking in this course. Also, keep it simple and be calm and confident. I'm sure you've written hundreds of emails in your life. It's not too different than what you're being asked to do in the task. So apply that knowledge back into this context. Just learn and become familiar with what the guidelines and expectations are. All right, free response question number 2, you're up at the plate. That's right, we're talking about the argumentative essay. And in this free response question, students are going to be given a set of 3 different sources. Each of the sources could have a different viewpoint, but the students are expected to interpret these sources and then include them in their opinion in the argumentative essay. The thing is, though, the clock is gonna be ticking on you. You as a student will only have 6 minutes to read the essay topic, the print sources, and listen to the audio material twice. Make sure that you're gonna be taking down notes while you do this. Hey, Mr. Valois, how do we get a 5? Well, thanks for asking. To get a 5, you're going to need to effectively treat the topic within the context of the task, demonstrate a high degree of comprehension of the source's viewpoints, integrate content from all 3 sources in support of an argument, present and defend your own position on the topic with a high degree of clarity, and develop an argument with coherence and detail. This should be an organized essay. You need to use transitional elements or cohesive devices. It's fully understandable with ease and clarity of expression. If you make a few mistakes, it doesn't impede in us understanding what you're trying to communicate. Make sure to use a varied and appropriate vocabulary and idiomatic language and expressions. Accuracy and variety in grammar, syntax, and usage with few errors. And develop paragraph length discourse with a variety of simple and compound sentences and some more complex sentences. All right, you'd like to know a few tips? Well, one tip you should definitely do is create a document on those transitional elements or cohesive devices. In French, we call them les marqueurs de relation. So check them out. I'm sure you're going to be exposed to them throughout the year, but store all those in a document so that you can quickly draw on those. And that's going to help you develop your presentational writing and your speaking skills, no doubt. Also, the argumentative essay doesn't ask you to go into the exam with a million facts and figures from all the course themes that you looked at throughout the year. No, what you really need to practice is your ability to interpret the sources that are given to you. So it doesn't matter what you learned before necessarily. It's in that moment you have to be able to make sense of those sources. So do make sure that you're practicing these again throughout the whole year. It's going to be really tough to do it if you wait till the last minute. Numéro 3, conversation. The third free response question is on conversation. And this is where you, the student, will interact one-on-one with a recording of a simulated conversation. A pre-recorded speaker is going to be on one end of the conversation, prompting you, asking you questions or your opinions about certain things. And throughout, you will have 5 times 20-second intervals to respond accurately and according to a guided outline that will be provided. So for instance, you might have a recording with some girl saying, "Hey, bonjour, comment ça va? Nous pensons aller au cinéma ce week-end. Pourrez-vous nous joindre? Est-ce que tu es libre?" Beep. Then you'll have 20 seconds to answer to that question. And you'll have a guided form here that will also tell you, you should tell them, no, you cannot go to the movies because you have to study for your exams. So in your response to that invitation to the movie theater, the cinéma, your answer should be no. It's not up to you to say, oh yeah, I'm free. No, the guidelines say no, and give a valuable response. So, désolé, non, je ne peux pas venir car il faut que j'étudie pour mes examens. Beep. Then 20 seconds end, and the speaker will go on to the next question. So that's kind of how it's like. How do we get a 5? Well, here's how. Make sure you maintain the exchange with a series of responses that is clearly appropriate within the context of the task, as I gave an example of. Provide required information, so you're responding to questions, statements, and supporting the opinion with frequent elaboration. You're given 20 seconds here. So you don't want to just give a 3-second answer. You want to elaborate. You are also going to be fully understandable with ease and clarity of expression. Occasional errors are not really preventing us from understanding what you're trying to say. You will have a varied and appropriate vocabulary and idiomatic language in your speaking. Your grammar, your syntax is going to be accurate. You're mostly consistent with the use of the register appropriate for the conversation. So just keep the tone the same, keep the register the same. If we're talking about inviting you to the movies as one of your best friends, you obviously don't need to vous voyez them. You can be casual. If it's a principal speaking to you, then, well, you want to be more formal with your register. Also, your pronunciation, intonation, and pacing make the responses comprehensible. Make them seem like it's real life. Now, of course, it depends on the context of the conversation and your ability to elaborate about it. But the more you know about keywords or ideas from that conversation, you can throw those in there, and that could help you, again, extend the conversation some more. But you still want to stay relevant. You don't want to just say stuff just because you're saying stuff. Make sure you follow the guidelines. Make sure you're listening to the conversation. All right, let's get into our fourth and final free response question. the cultural comparison. Again, in this one, the clock will be ticking. Or is it this way? You, the student, will only have 4 minutes to be able to read a prompt about a French-speaking culture and prepare notes to deliver a 2-minute presentation comparing that prompt, that culture, to a culture of your own or a community that you're very familiar with. And in order to get a 5, you have to effectively treat the topic within the context of the task. Clearly compare the target culture with your own or another community, including supporting details and relevant examples. Demonstrate understanding of the target culture, that culture which is in the prompt. Despite having a few minor inaccuracies, that's okay. Your presentation is organized. You've effectively used transitional elements or cohesive devices, les marqueurs de relation. If you make some mistakes, they really don't impede in understanding what you're trying to say and the points you're trying to make. You're using a varied and appropriate vocabulary. Your grammar and your syntax is on fire, my goodness. You are mostly consistent with your use of the register. And of course, your pronunciation, intonation, and pacing make your response comprehensible. Again, your errors do not impede us from understanding what you're trying to say. And you do have the right to clarify or self-correct if this is going to help us better understand what you are trying to say. All right, Mr. Valois' final tips for this exam. Let's focus on how you can do better in your cultural comparison. Get to know your French cultures, okay? Whether it be France, whether it be the Congo, Morocco, Canada, Switzerland, get to know different French cultures. That will expose you to different accents, regionalism, different traditions, different cultures, okay? The broader you know French cultures, the better you will succeed, especially in this part of the exam. It's kind of like what I always tell my French students: do not be a stale baguette. Go out there, find a podcast from Belgium or Quebec that talks about something interesting that you are interested in. Watch a French film, whether you put the subtitles on or not. Become more and more exposed to this. Follow news segments from different parts of the world. You know, the internet, we got everything. We can connect to anything. So go out there and look for sources that are interesting to you. This might happen through assignments that your teacher gives you, but also in your own time. Go explore this. And of course, make sure that you know your own culture and how to express it and discuss it in French. If you are able to discuss your culture well, and you have a good broad understanding of French cultures, again, this is something that last minute people, don't be last minute, okay? Make sure that you're practicing this throughout the year. If you have an idea of French cultures and your own culture, you should blow this 4th free response question out of the water. So that's the Advanced Placement French Language and Culture Course and Exam Description breakdown. I really hope you enjoyed it. Just remember too, to support your learning, there have never been more resources available to students than there are today. You have the internet. Go out there and explore and develop those French listening, reading, writing, and speaking skills. And I sincerely hope that this video was worth your time. If you liked it, please give me a like, drop a comment. Please subscribe to the channel. Spread this to your classmates. Tell your teacher about it. Tell your other teachers about it. I really hope that this can be of some use for you in being able to either plan an amazing AP French Language and Culture class, or as a student, really do well on the exam. So thank you so much for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care. I'm Monsieur Valois. Bonne chance.